Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time it happens to be while you're watching this video. Welcome to the CloudChartist weekly Ichimoku wrap for the week ending October 7th. This is October 9th, Sunday evening. The markets are going to open in 20 minutes. It seems like I always make the video at the last possible moment. I did spend a lot of the day taking down my hurricane shutters and cleaning up my yard. Didn't quite finish unpacking stuff that I had packed away. I just wanted to mention that I really appreciate everybody that reached out to me, knowing that I was dead smack in the path of Hurricane Matthew, which fortunately passed me by in a loving and friendly manner. Didn't really cause any damage besides, a few screens out and a few branches. Actually I only lost power for about maybe 4 hours. Half of my neighborhood was completely out for the whole next day. I was able to trade the next day, so that was cool. I was a little bit nervous getting into trades because I didn't know what could happen. So thank you for the love. I really felt it. All my Twitter people and Skype people and people in my chat room and everyone, people that I had, hadn't heard from in a long time, reaching out. Really appreciate it. Anyway, thanks, and on to the analysis. So we're looking, and I'm going to not forget CL this week. So if you're waiting for that extra bonus CL video because I forgot CL, it is not going to happen. I'm going to do it. But you might get an extra bonus CL video if you ask for one. I'll make one for sure. All right, looking at ES, we see, and you'll have to pardon my drawings that are on here because I'll show you my drawings on a shorter time frame, might as well. I'm zoomed out to show you the big picture. This is, a nice bullish Ichimoku chart. We have the Tenkan-sen going sideways and the Kijun-sen going sideways, asking for some consolidation off this bull flag type pattern here. And let me zoom on in so we can see some more details. So what was really important to me as far as the weekly close was that we maintained a close above the Tenkan-sen, which would keep us in the fully bullish mode. And indeed we did close above the Tenkan-sen. We closed at 21.4650. Tenkan-sen was at 21.4580, so we barely squeaked in there, but we did manage to do it. You notice also, if I move the cursor out of the way here, that while the candle of last week's candle did trade outside these trend lines that I drew marking this triangle pattern, the body actually held those trend lines. So pretty cool if you like drawing triangles. I am a fan myself. And just because that triangle's there, I'm going to zoom into like shorter time frame and show you how nicely that triangle pattern played out. Now you might notice from this drawing that when I draw trend lines, I tend to try to get as many points as possible that may or may not include tails. This top trend line is not including this tail and this tail and this tail because I could get more points that way. I felt like these levels were more important. And this trend line, I started off at the candle close down here, and I actually, the bottom trend line was more difficult because this price action was not really that triangular from all the way down here. But I did nail this point and all of these points here, and I think that bottom trend line works. But important to note on the 4-hour time frame that we did lose the trend line that I drew and put in a close below it on the last 4. Let me zoom in a little bit more. We traded under the trend line and put in some tweezer bottoms here, traded back up, hit the top of the cloud here, and got rejected and closed under the trend line. So even though things are fully bullish on the weekly time frame, the 4-hour, the trend line, and the cloud are both acting as resistance, and the Tenkan-sen, which is at 21.4975, and the Kijun-sen, which is at 21.4875. All of those things are acting as resistance on the 4-hour time frame. So that's pretty important for the shorter term going forward. Let's go back to the weekly. I don't want to get into shorter time frames too much, just a little bit of note there. So what I'm saying is that even though we did hold the weekly time frame, we could see some resistance when we start off the new week. All right, let's look at the Russell. Russell has been a leader, although at the end of the week it was not leading as well. Also saw a triangle that I drew on the Russell, but it's important to note that this chart is fully bullish in Ichimoku terms, except for the fact that we closed at 1229.50 and the Tenkan-sen is at 1231.10. So we actually closed a little bit under the Tenkan-sen. Not a super big deal. Chart is still quite bullish, but it's always significant when we close under the Tenkan-sen. Also of note, we did put in a lower high and a lower low, so there is a trend change to the downside on the Russell on the weekly time frame. The prior week we had an inside candle from the week before that, but then we did change the trend when I think actually let me just check this, like the low 112.26.90 and 12.20. Yeah, we did actually just a little bit lower than last week's candle. So that's important to point out that we are in a fast time frame downtrend, just in candlestick analysis on the Russell. We're also pretty extended above the flat cloud below, and the cloud is going to be flat all the way into the end of the year. And then we have this little dip down right at the very end of the year. That awful week that I always tell everybody I'm not going to trade, that week between Christmas and New Year's. So let's move on. So still fully bullish, except for that close under the Tenkan-sen is important to point out. Let's look at the Dow. Oops. I've been making pyramids, so I might be a little hopped up on resin at the moment. My office is quite resiny. If you're not sure what I'm talking about when I'm saying I've been making pyramids, I make pyramids, and you can check them out on my Etsy store. If I remember, I'll put a link to that in somewhere in this video or in the comments or something like that. You can check out my Etsy store. I actually have a fine arts degree. That's sort of my main pursuit, but somehow I got into doing this. So looking at the Dow, we see that we did put in yet another close underneath the Tenkan-sen after we were unable to put in a close above the Tenkan-sen last week and the week before after losing the Tenkan-sen 4 weeks ago. So we did put an inside candle in. It's a hammer type candle. You used to notice that the body is quite small and at the upper end of the candlestick, and lots of buyers came in making this big tail, just like big bottoming tail, just like the big bottoming tail on the last candle. But the fact that we were unable to we just traded slightly over the Tenkan-sen and then put a close in a lower than last week's close. Not particularly bullish, very non-committal sideways price action for the Dow. But in the overall picture, the Dow is still quite bullish, just except for that close under the Tenkan-sen. We could trade sideways in a range between the Tenkan-sen and the Kijun-sen. If we do start trading down more towards, beyond maybe the 50% level like this, I'm just eyeballing it, but it looks like the 50% level is about where we traded to before we found buyers. So if we do trade below that, then we can, fib this area. I think I went over that last week. Fibbing the area, you could fib from the Tenkan-sen at 18,223 to the Kijun-sen down at 17,792. Draw some fib levels in there to have some more levels to work with in between. Or you can just look at shorter time frames on the Ichimoku charts, which I'm not going to do right now, but that's what I would do. Let's look at the NASDAQ. NASDAQ is still looking extremely strong. We did put in a higher high and a higher low, so still an uptrend. This is sort of like a miniature bull flag as far as I'm concerned. Pretty tight range though, however. It's almost like a spinning top type doji. If we do get a pullback, I would be looking for the Tenkan Sen to hold that 47.5875. We also have lots of levels caused by these candles here, you know, like 48.15 area could hold as well. But overall, this chart is fully bullish in Ichimoku terms. We do have a rising cloud. Even though it's really far below, it could be support rising price action. Into the end of the year, it flattens out like in mid-November and then does a dip at the very end of the year. Just so we'll worry about that when it comes. That same time period that I just mentioned on the Dow. All right, let's look at gold. Everybody has been doing a lot of looking at gold, haven't they? I haven't. I actually don't really watch gold that much. I'm more of a silver trader myself. All right, looking at gold, we see that we are still bullish in Ichimoku terms as we are over the cloud. Whenever we're over the cloud, we're considered bullish. But we are in a downtrend. Obvious, very bearish candle last week for gold. We did put in a bit of a bottoming tail, and I'll show you why that happened. If you look at the Chicow over here, this red line representing price action, time shifted 26 periods into the past, you notice that the Chicow came down and came into support at the top of this green candle over here where my crosshairs are. That high was 12.45, and what was the low of last week's candle? 12.43.20. So see what I'm getting at. The Chicow found support at this candle, and that's where price found support. Next week, or this upcoming week that's about to be this week in about 8 minutes, gold is going to be at this candle level. So we have the top of this candle is 1264.70. We're obviously below that already, and then the actual top of the candle body is 1241.80. So if we do find more selling and we come down to 1241.80, I would look for a bounce there. If we do not get a bounce there, the Tenkan Sen for the Chicow is 1239.70. So around 1240, I expect there to be buying support for gold. If we do not find buying support for gold at that level and we get below this candle with the Chicow, then I would expect that it's entirely possible that gold could sell all the way down to the cloud, right around that 1200, that magic 1200 number. It's actually slightly lower than it's 1196.40 is the actual level of the top of the cloud here. Other than that, you know, I think that chances are that we might have a short-term bottom in gold, but I would be cautious to make sure that last week's low holds, basically. And as far as the overall chart, it's obviously bullish, except for the fact that it's underneath the Tenkan Sen and underneath the Kijun Sen. We do have a nice, thick, rising cloud support. If you're bullish on a chart, you really want to see this kind of nice rising cloud. It's beautiful support for coming ahead. Let's look at silver. Oh, look, some fibs. What were those? Those were based on, I don't know, daily time frame, it looks like. I'll leave them on there and then we can look afterwards. So silver, very bearish candle, came down and tagged this. Let's see what the low was. The low was 17.11.5. I had a fib at 17.094, so only a couple cents above that is where we did find support. But we don't have a lot of support going forward for this week's candle. The Chicow is far above any other candles currently. This week, the Chicow is not going to have support till way down here at like 1640-ish, 1639.5. So silver bulls better really hope that the low is in. Otherwise, we could see trading back down to 1640. Even the top of the cloud down here at 1569. For those of you who don't know this, I'm a bit of a metals, especially silver, perma bear. Um, I, I don't know. I don't have a TV, so I haven't really been programmed by all of the hype about how silver is more rare than gold, which is basically, as far as I'm concerned, hype that has been engineered to sell people silver. Whether or not it's true, I'm sure some people will argue with me that it's really true, and silver is really rare, and we're going to run out of it, and therefore it's going back to $50 or something like that. But I'm not feeling that way. So, so I'm not even remotely surprised about this price action. I expected that when we put in a close under the Tenkan-sen last week that we would find continued selling, and indeed we did. I was expecting that we could find support at the Kijun-sen at 1829, 1830 area, and that totally failed, and we sold much lower. So let's just look at the daily. I'm just curious where I drew those fibs from. Yeah, so it's looking like, so I drew these fibs, and this is a little micro lesson on how I draw fibs. I see that I have 4 minutes left to do the rest of the charts before the market opens, so you'll have to bear with me if we get some new candles opening up. So the way I draw fibs, generally, not always, but most of the time, is I base my fibs on the candle closes rather than the spikes. Like, I wouldn't have used this spike high at 21.22 in my fibs. And I find it works for me. So we see that indeed this 38.2 level was important and did try to hold. We put in the spinning top doji. That was a potential bounce level, but indeed we lost it and came down and put in some tweezer bottoms here on the daily. So we did actually put in a green candle on Friday. So it could be that we are actually getting a reversal to the upside. If we do get a reversal to the upside, we did hit bottom out in the RSI. You see this little light blue thing down here. So we are oversold on the daily time frame, which is significant. So we could get a bounce to the upside. If we do get a bounce, it could possibly be limited by the Tenkan-sen, which is currently at 1844.30. 18,443. That's not actually a number that silver trades in, so let's just call it 1844. And I'm guessing that when the market opens, that the Tenkan-sen is going to go flat on the daily for silver. Geez, I'm sorry for my extra long analysis on silver. It's just dear to my heart, All right, let's go back to the weekly time frame and let's go look at some treasuries. I really can't figure out what the treasuries are doing as of late, although the Bund seems to tell me what the treasuries are doing. So last week we put in a really bearish candle for bonds, but we did find support roughly at the same level that we keep finding support at, which is this 164.13 and thereabouts. I think the low actually was, let's see what the low was, 164.08, so slightly below that, a few ticks below that, but this area has been acting as good support for a while. That's why I have a purple line there. So in the event that we are putting in a tail and we could get a bounce here, any bounce should be limited to the upside on the weekly time frame by the Kijun-sen, which is up here at 169.05. And it looks like we actually, let's zoom in and see, because I can't tell because I'm going blind from too many screens. We did get a bear cross here. That is when the Kijun-sen crosses over the Tenkan-sen, or the Tenkan-sen crosses under the Kijun-sen. That is called a bear cross in Ichimoku terms. Overall, however, let's look at some big picture stuff. We're still bullish, and as far as in general Ichimoku terms, as we are still above the cloud. We do have good cloud support here. Even if we come down, we could test the cloud. We could go as low as the top of the cloud is at 162.18. And then we have this nice rising cloud into the end of the year. Note the bonds have a rising cloud where the other indexes had a dropping cloud. Just keep that in mind. Let's look at the 10-year, probably similar. Wow, look at that. 10-year actually came down and tested the cloud. And interestingly, the cloud is slightly different on the 10-year as well. You notice that we did come down and, wow, jeez, that's a big gap up from the ES. I've been like completely in a news void for the whole weekend. I tried to go on Twitter and it was just like all that Trump stuff, you know what I'm talking about, and I was just not interested. So anyway, we did find support at the top of the cloud, and we are opening above the cloud. And so it looks like if we do get continued selling, we can look for support down here at the actual cloud at 128.24 on ZN. If we do get buying, we could find resistance at the Tenkan-sen at 131.065. Let's do crude. You thought I was going to forget, didn't you? All the crude people that normally like only watch my video to, you know, I don't know, a few minutes in are like have already turned it off already. They're like, why is she talking about like, you know, all this other crap when all we want to know about is crude levels? All right, so looking at crude, you notice that I had drawn this sweet triangle that was obviously on shorter time frames, and we actually put in this beautiful candle above the last week's candle was above the trend line, held the trend line, upper trend line that I had nicely, and so that is considered. I consider that to be a triangle break to the upside. Crude has a tendency, if you've noticed, with these type of things, and you might call this a wedge also. Some people like to call these wedges. It's not about the word wedge bugs me, but anyway, it's like reminds me of wedgie. I don't like those. They're not very comfortable. So if we do, sometimes crude has a tendency to break out, do an upside breakout from a wedge and then fail miserably. So that's entirely possible. I don't really know what's going on with all this OPEC stuff. But right now, we're still fully bullish in Ichimoku terms. If we do get a pullback, we can look for potentially support at the top of this trend line, which is around 47.50 thereabouts. And then at the Tenkan-sen below that at 46.87. I also have a 61.8 fib at 47.02 based on a shorter time frame, so I would keep an eye on that level as well. If we lose the Tenkan-sen, we have the Kijun-sen offering support underneath at 45.34. Let me just switch to the daily and see if that's what time frame I drew these fibs on. Let's see. Yes, that is what time frame I drew these fibs on, and also this the triangle looks pretty nice on this time frame too. So it looks like a bull flag on the daily, and you can see that I drew my fibs from these candle bodies down here and these candle bodies up here. So from 51.53 to 39.72. All right, what have I forgotten? Let's look at the dollar. The dollar went crazy last week. Pardon me. I had to have a little drinky poo there. I'm drinking water, unsweetened cranberry juice, and Emergency mixed together. And the flavor of Emergency I have right now is pink lemonade, and it's really disgusting. All right. Sorry, I'm getting so distracted. Interesting. All right, so the dollar came up, traded above the cloud here after being in bearish territory last week, and ended up closing right below the cloud. You can see that. Put in a close at 96.50. So it's currently at cloud resistance right here. The cloud is very thin, so it'll be interesting to see if we can trade above the cloud or if it continues to act as resistance. If we do trade above the cloud, and this is what happened last week as well, which is why we found resistance when we got to this level, is because the Chikou over here, this red line here, representing price action time shifted 26 periods in the past. You notice I repeat that all the time, so you will remember. And so it'll make sense to you. Like, this is actual current price action. It's just drawn 26 periods back. So 26 weeks in this case. So back in April is what we're interacting with back here. So the Chikou actually ran into the Kijun-sen up here and found resistance, thus the topping tail. All right, so if the dollar is unable to get above the cloud here, it could be trading in a range between the cloud, where it is right now, and the Tenkan-sen, which is flat below at 95.63. So right in this general vicinity. If we do get above the cloud, then everything is fine and dandy until we get a drop in the cloud going into the end of October, and then a very flat cloud for all the way into the end of the year and all the way into the beginning of next year. So very flat price action ahead for the dollar if it trades with Ichimoku. All right, what else can we look at? Let's look at, I haven't looked at coffee in forever. I've been pretty busy with my room. I have some really great members in there, so a lot of like good interaction and learning going on right now. Some people, it's really amazes me at how, well, it doesn't really amaze me because I already knew this, but people can learn Ichimoku really fast. Like, if you get over the idea that it's hard to learn and you just actually make an effort to see what is going on, it's actually really easy to learn and really easy to work with. And so people have been asking really good questions, and I feel like everyone in my chat room, if you happen to be listening to me, I love you. You're great. You're making me really happy. All right. So coffee, very nice uptrend. Wow. I should have looked at this before. I used to trade coffee a lot, but I just, I don't have the screen space at the moment. So last week we put in a close underneath the Tenkan-sen after putting in this sort of crazy bullish action above the Tenkan-sen. We are pretty high extended over the cloud. We do have this dip in the cloud coming up, so I would not be inclined to necessarily trust that this price action is going to remain above the Tenkan-sen, but we shall see. And one other thing that I want to look at, I could look at corn real quick just to check it out. Corn still looks pretty bearish, but it is making progress. It put in this hammer candle last week and or 2 weeks ago, and then put in a sort of graveyard-looking doji, not really doji, a gravestone-looking candle, like lots of selling up there. But it is still holding the Tenkan-sen, and the Tenkan still is sloping up. So maybe the bottom is in for corn. Who knows? Let's look at the Nikkei. The Nikkei is still trapped under the clouds, still bearish. It did manage to put in a close above the Tenkan-sen again last week. It didn't manage to get into the cloud. I mean, it did actually manage to close in the cloud, but now it is sort of right on the edge of the cloud. So it does kind of look like a pretty nice, messy bottoming pattern, though, don't you think? Potentially, like an inverse head and shoulders type bottoming pattern. I mean, it's really messy, and that would be a huge stretch, but sometimes bottoming patterns just look like bottoming patterns, even if they are super messy, inverse head and shoulders. All right, I'm gonna call it, and thank you for joining me. And I will, if you're interested in learning more about Ichimoku, you can check out my website, CloudChartist.com. And hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions. Feel free to ask questions in the comment section below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you didn't like this video and you want to give me a thumbs down, it would be really awesome if you could explain why. I have these mystery people that give me thumbs down and don't say anything. I don't know what their problem is, but I mean, everybody has their opinion about, free information. If I'm doing something drastically wrong, it would be nice to know about it. All right. Anyway, thanks, guys, and I'll see you next week.